In Karachi's upscale neighborhood, life moved at a glittering pace, yet within those polished walls often lay silences heavier than noise. Komal Begum, wife of the prominent politician Sardar Kaiser Hayat, seemed to have everything: wealth, status, respect, a luxurious home. To the public eye, she embodied elegance and success. Women envied her wardrobe, her poise, her access to power. Men regarded her as the refined wife of a council member whose career was rising with every election. But behind that facade, Komal's days were marked by an emptiness she struggled to name. Kaiser Hayat, though respected in political circles, was cold at home. His hours were consumed by meetings, media appearances, and dinners where Komal was no more than a trophy at his side. Their marriage, once a promise of companionship, had become a contract of appearances. Komal played her role flawlessly, attending charity galas, supervising household staff, and smiling politely in front of cameras. Yet when the lights dimmed, she returned to a room that felt like a golden cage. To fill her days, Komal began overseeing one of the family's new business ventures, a high-end flat project rising in Karachi's growing district. It gave her purpose, a reason to leave the silent halls of her mansion and step into the real, breathing world of dust, labor, and ambition. She would arrive on site in her neat shalwar kameez, shaded dupatta, clipboard in hand, and walk among the workers. Most would look at her with respect, but also distance. She was the madam, unreachable, untouchable. Amid the crowd of sweating men mixing cement and hammering beams, one face began to catch her attention again and again. A young man, perhaps in his late 20s, lean yet strong, his skin bronzed by the Karachi sun, his smile disarmingly simple. His name was Faraz. Unlike the others, he never sought her attention, never tried to impress. He worked tirelessly, hauling bricks, balancing on scaffolding, his movements swift and confident. And even when sweat trickled down his forehead, his lips carried a quiet smile, as if he held an inner reservoir of peace. Komal found her gaze drawn toward him more often than she intended. She scolded herself at first. Why notice a laborer when she belonged to a man of such stature? Yet Faraz stood out not because of his class, but because of something she rarely saw in her world: sincerity. One afternoon, as she reviewed blueprints, a commotion broke out. A wooden frame supporting steel rods wobbled dangerously. Before anyone else could react, Faraz dashed forward, bracing it with his bare hands. The structure steadied, but a sharp edge tore into his palm. Blood began to seep out. Workers gasped, but Faraz shrugged, brushing it off. Without thinking, Komal rushed forward. "Why didn't you call someone?" "You could have been badly hurt," she exclaimed, pulling out the small first aid kit she always kept in her bag. Carefully, she cleaned the wound, wrapping his hand in gauze. Faraz looked down, shy but grateful, and whispered, "It's nothing, madam. If I didn't do it, everyone's work would have stopped." Their eyes met for the first time, hers full of concern, his lit with quiet resilience. It was a fleeting moment, yet something stirred within both of them, a connection neither sought but could no longer deny. For Komal Begum, it was the first spark of warmth she had felt in years. The following days unfolded with a new rhythm on the construction site. For Komal Begum, what had once been a duty, checking progress, approving budgets, ensuring deadlines, had become something else entirely. Each visit carried with it an anticipation, a subtle quickening of her heartbeat as she stepped out of her car, her eyes scanning the busy yard until they found Faraz. Faraz, too, began to notice. He was not a man used to being looked at, not by someone of her stature. All his life he had known only toil, rising before dawn, laboring until his body ached, returning home to a modest rented room where dreams were stitched together with scarcity. He had never imagined that a woman like Komal Begum, draped in grace and authority, would even remember his name. Yet her eyes would seek him in the crowd, her lips offering the smallest of smiles when their gazes met. Their first real conversation happened during a midday break. The laborers were scattered in small groups, eating from steel lunchboxes, sipping water in the shade. Komal, instead of retreating to her air-conditioned car as usual, walked across the dusty yard holding a thermos of tea and a basket of snacks. The workers looked up in disbelief as she gently set the food down. "You all work so hard," she said softly. "At least today, let me serve you." Murmurs rippled through the men. Some grinned nervously, others bowed their heads in thanks. But when she reached Faraz, her hand lingered a second longer as she passed him a cup of tea. He looked startled, then murmured, "Madam, this isn't necessary. You don't need to do this." Her eyes met his, steady and unflinching. "It isn't about necessity, Faraz. Sometimes the heart wants to do something, and that is reason enough." That evening, when the site had quieted and shadows stretched long across the half-built walls, Komal found herself sitting on a wooden bench, staring at the horizon. Faraz, gathering tools nearby, hesitated before approaching. He wiped his hands on a rag and stood a few feet away. "Madam, may I ask you something?" His voice was cautious, almost apologetic. She nodded. "Why do you talk to me?" "There are so many others here. I am just a laborer." Komal inhaled deeply. The truth was heavy, yet she spoke it anyway. "Because in your eyes, Faraz, I see honesty. I see dreams that aren't covered in gold but are more precious than anything my world has ever given me. You remind me of something I lost long ago: sincerity." For a long moment, silence hung between them, filled only by the distant hum of the city. Then Faraz spoke quietly. "I don't have much, madam. Just a dream that one day I will build a proper house for my mother. That is all I live for." Her throat tightened. "And do you know what I live for?" "Appearances, photographs, social events, none of which give me the peace your simple dream holds." That night, as Komal lay in her grand but empty bedroom, the memory of Faraz's earnest words stayed with her. And in his small, dimly lit room, Faraz lay awake, remembering the softness in her gaze. Neither said the word aloud, but both knew. Something had begun. The monsoon clouds swept over Karachi, casting the half-built flats into a somber shade of gray. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the construction site into a maze of mud and puddles. Workers scrambled for shelter under tin sheets, their voices rising above the roar of water. Amidst the chaos, Komal Begum stood at the edge of the site, her dupatta pulled tightly over her head, searching. Her eyes scanned through the blur of rain until they found him. Faraz was still on the scaffolding, hammering in a loose beam. His clothes clung to his frame, drenched completely, but his movements remained steady. To him, work did not stop for rain or exhaustion. Komal's chest tightened at the sight. She hurried forward, her sandals slipping in the mud, an umbrella clutched in her hand. "Faraz!" she called out, her voice barely carrying over the downpour. He turned, startled to see her standing below. She climbed carefully onto the lower level of the scaffolding and thrust the umbrella above his head. "Are you mad? You'll catch your death up here." Faraz blinked, rain dripping down his lashes. For a moment he seemed unable to speak. Then a faint smile tugged at his lips. "Madame, if I stop, the beam may fall. Others' work will be delayed. It's nothing. I'm used to this." Her hand trembled slightly as she held the umbrella. "You speak as though your life doesn't matter." "But it does, Faraz. It matters." Their eyes locked. The world around them, the pounding rain, the murmurs of workers watching from afar faded. In that suspended moment, neither was a madame nor a laborer. They were simply two souls meeting, drenched in truth. Later that day, as the rain eased and the workers dispersed, Komal found herself walking beside Faraz toward a half-sheltered corner. They sat on a stack of wooden planks, steam rising from the wet ground. She pulled her shawl closer and asked softly, "Tell me, Faraz, do you ever think of yourself? Beyond your duty, beyond your struggles?" He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the muddy ground. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but dreams feel like luxuries I can't afford. My mother is everything I have. If she's safe and cared for, that is enough." Komal's heart ached. She whispered, almost to herself, "I live surrounded by luxuries, yet I am starved of what you hold so easily. Meaning." That confession hung in the damp air. Faraz turned to her, his brow furrowed, as though seeing her for the first time not as the untouchable wife of a politician, but as a woman, lonely, searching, fragile. From that day onward, their conversations deepened. What began as polite exchanges of greetings became longer talks during breaks, moments stolen at the site's quiet corners. She spoke of the emptiness of her life with Kaiser, the absence of warmth in a marriage bound by appearances. He listened, his silence carrying more comfort than any words. In return, he shared his childhood stories, his struggle to leave the village for work in Karachi, his hopes of giving his mother a home where rain would never leak through the roof. But whispers began to stir. Workers noticed the way Komal's visits lingered longer, how her gaze sought out Faraz. They spoke in hushed tones, careful but curious. Outside the site, neighbors and other officials' wives started to gossip too. Why did Komal Begum spend so much time at the project? Why did she personally check even the smallest details when she had engineers to do it? Komal knew. She could feel the eyes, hear the murmurs. Yet when she stood with Faraz, all those voices blurred into insignificance. She had discovered a piece of herself in him, something she refused to bury again. Still, in the back of her mind, a question lingered like the fading drizzle. How long could this remain hidden? The whispers, once faint, soon became too sharp to ignore. In the narrow lanes around the project, shopkeepers exchanged knowing glances. The wives of other officials, always quick to sniff scandal, began to gather in tea circles and discuss Komal Begum's frequent visits. Their tones were dripping with judgment. "She inspects every nail as though she's an engineer herself," one scoffed. Another leaned in, eyes gleaming with gossip. "No, it's not the building she inspects. It's that young laborer. They say she speaks to him every day." Komal Begum heard fragments of these whispers carried by acquaintances, but she held her chin high. Outwardly, she remained poised, attending charity functions and maintaining her social role. Inwardly, though, each rumor felt like a stone tossed at fragile glass. She knew the world she inhabited was unforgiving, that even a rumor could destroy reputations. But when she stood beside Faraz, all those warnings dissolved. One afternoon, as the workers packed up and the site fell quiet, Komal lingered. She watched the sky shift into shades of orange as the sun descended. Faraz was gathering tools when she called him over. They sat on a wooden bench near the boundary wall, their shadows long in the fading light. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "Faraz, do you feel what I feel? That every time we talk, every time I see you, something in me comes alive again?" Faraz looked down, his calloused hands twisting the edge of his shirt. For a moment, silence stretched, broken only by the chirping of birds. Then he admitted softly, "I don't know how to say it, Begum Sahiba. But yes. Whenever I see you, I feel as if life has more meaning. You make me feel seen." The honesty in his words struck her deeply. A tear slid down her cheek, though she quickly brushed it away. She whispered, "I don't remember the last time anyone made me feel alive like this. Not even my husband." That admission hung between them like lightning. Faraz inhaled sharply, realizing the weight of what she had confessed. His heart raced. "But Begum Sahiba," he said, his voice unsteady, "our worlds are different. You belong to a place of power and respect. I am just a laborer. If anyone finds out..." Komal reached across and grasped his hand, her touch firm yet trembling. "I don't care what they say. I am tired of living for appearances, tired of pretending. For once, I want to live for myself, and right now that means being with you." Faraz's breath caught, his chest tightening under the force of emotions he had long suppressed. He had never dared dream of something so impossible, yet here it was, her words, her gaze, her courage. As the last sliver of sun disappeared, they sat in silence, their hands entwined. Neither noticed the two laborers who had lingered at the gate, whispering as they saw them together. By the next morning, the story had already taken flight. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs into rumors, until finally they reached the ears of Sardar Kaiser Hayat himself. The proud politician who prided himself on control and image was about to confront the storm that had been building in the shadows of his own home. And for Komal and Faraz, the fragile sanctuary they had built was about to be tested like never before. The inevitable storm arrived one humid evening. The site was almost deserted, the last of the laborers leaving with weary steps. Faraz lingered, cleaning tools, while Komal Begum sat across from him discussing trivial things with a smile that betrayed her happiness. For a few stolen moments, they felt safe, but safety was an illusion. The sound of a car screeched to a halt outside the gate. Heavy footsteps stormed in. Faraz's hands froze, the wrench slipping from his grip. Komal's smile faltered when she saw him. Sardar Kaiser Hayat, her husband, face flushed with fury, eyes blazing. "Komal!" His voice cracked through the silence like a whip. So it's true. The whispers, the rumors, all true. Komal rose slowly, her heart hammering but her expression composed. "Kaiser, calm yourself." "Calm myself?" he thundered, jabbing a finger toward Faraz. "You bring shame upon my name for this. For a laborer?" His voice dripped with contempt as he spat the word. "You dare humiliate me in front of this city?" Faraz stood rigid, chest heaving, but he held his ground. He wanted to speak, but Komal lifted her hand, silencing him. She stepped forward, her voice steady, almost gentle but unyielding. "Enough, Kaiser. If you want to accuse someone, accuse me. Faraz is not to blame. I chose to be here. I chose him." The declaration fell like thunder. Faraz's eyes widened. Kaiser's face twisted with disbelief. "You?" he hissed. "You dare speak this way to me? Do you even understand what you're saying? You're destroying our family, our honor." Komal's eyes glistened, but her chin remained high. "What family, Kaiser? What honor? You built a life where I was nothing but decoration, a name on your arm at parties, a silent woman in a house filled with emptiness. I have lived in your shadow, unloved, unseen. I will not anymore." Faraz's fists clenched at his sides. He had faced storms, hunger, and hardship, but never had he stood between two worlds colliding like this. He wanted to speak, to defend her, but he knew his words would only fuel Kaiser's rage. Kaiser's voice shook with venom. "You think this boy can give you what I could not? He will never be my equal. He will never be accepted." Komal took a step closer to him, her voice cutting like steel. "I no longer care about acceptance. I care about truth. And the truth is, I would rather live with Faraz in a shack built with honesty than rot in your mansion of lies." For the first time, Kaiser faltered, as if struck by her words. His face reddened, his mouth opened, then shut again. Rage burned in his eyes, but beneath it, there was a flicker of something else. Fear. Fear of losing control, fear of public shame. He turned sharply, his coat flaring as he stormed out, muttering curses. The screech of his car tires echoed in the empty street. Komal's shoulders sagged with the weight of the confrontation. Faraz stepped forward, his voice low. "Begum Sahiba, what you said, are you sure? You know what this means, don't you?" She turned to him, her eyes shining with both tears and resolve. "Yes, Faraz. I know, but I will no longer live a lie. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Faraz looked at her then, not as a madam from another world, but as a woman who had chosen him despite everything. For the first time, he felt not just the burden of struggle, but the power of love that dared defy the world. But deep inside, both knew the battle had only just begun. The confrontation at the site was only the beginning. Within days, Sardar Kaiser Hayat's fury erupted not just in his home, but across Karachi's social and political circles. A man whose career thrived on image could not allow whispers of scandal to define him. He had spent years cultivating a reputation of respect, and now, in his eyes, Komal had endangered it all. His retaliation was swift and merciless. First came the newspapers. Anonymous sources leaked stories of Komal's inappropriate closeness to a laborer. Sensational headlines screamed across the front pages. "Council member's wife in scandalous affair." Columnists dissected her every move, questioning her character, her upbringing, even her role as a mother, though she had no children. Some painted her as a rebellious woman blinded by lust, others as a naive victim manipulated by a cunning worker. Television talk shows became battlegrounds. Politicians wagged their fingers, claiming the scandal insulted the sanctity of marriage and the values of society. Activists, however, took another stance. Some women's rights groups defended Komal, declaring she had every right to seek happiness. Karachi was divided. Was she a disgrace, grace, or was she courageous? Komal watched these storms unfold from the privacy of her home. The mansion, once a symbol of status, now felt like a cage where every window looked out onto judgmental eyes. Yet she refused to bow her head. Each morning she stood before the mirror, adjusted her dupatta with quiet dignity, and told herself, "They will not break me." Faraz, on the other hand, faced a different nightmare. At the site, laborers began treating him with suspicion. Some muttered insults under their breath, accusing him of overstepping his place. Others avoided him, afraid of being associated with the scandal. Work offers dried up. No contractor wanted to hire a man branded by controversy. One evening, as Faraz sat on the broken cot in his modest room, he buried his face in his hands. The burden of Komal's sacrifice pressed on his chest. He whispered to himself, "She gave up everything for me. And what do I give her in return?" A world full of shame, Komal sensed his struggle. She arrived one night, quietly slipping into his small room, carrying a covered dish of food. Sitting beside him, she gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "Faraz, look at me," she said softly. He lifted his head, his eyes clouded with guilt. "They're destroying your name because of me," he muttered. Komal shook her head firmly. "No, Faraz. They're destroying it because I dared to step out of the role they built for me. Don't carry a burden that is not yours. If there is guilt, it is mine. And I don't regret it." He searched her face, stunned by her resolve. "But Begum Sahiba, how long can we fight them? They have power, money, everything." She smiled sadly, yet her voice rang with strength. "And what do we have? The truth. That is more than they will ever know." From that night forward, Faraz no longer called her Begum Sahiba. At her insistence, he simply said, "Komal." Their bond grew not in secrecy now, but in defiance. Still, the storm outside raged on. Kaiser, humiliated and enraged, made his next move. He summoned lawyers, determined to drag the matter into court. If society had begun to split its opinion, he would ensure the law itself crushed her rebellion. For Komal and Faraz, the fight was no longer about whispers. It was about survival. The day of the first court hearing dawned heavy with tension. Outside the Grand Karachi courthouse, crowds had already gathered, their voices mixing into a chorus of curiosity, outrage, and support. News vans lined the street, cameras poised to capture every angle of the scandal that had gripped the city. Komal Begum arrived first, dressed not in jewels or silks, but in a simple white shalwar kameez, her dupatta draped modestly across her shoulders. There was dignity in her step, even as reporters swarmed around, firing questions. "Do you regret your actions? Are you leaving your husband for this laborer?" Komal said nothing, her silence louder than any denial. Faraz entered moments later, head bowed slightly, dressed in a freshly pressed but modest kurta. To the world, he was a laborer daring to step into the halls of justice beside a politician's wife. But to himself, he was simply a man standing for the truth of his heart. Inside the courtroom, the air buzzed with anticipation. Sardar Kaiser Hayat sat flanked by his lawyers, his face carved in stone, rage simmering beneath his polished exterior. He refused to look at Komal as though even acknowledging her now would diminish his pride. The proceedings began with Kaiser's lawyer rising dramatically. His words boomed through the chamber. "My lord, today we are not merely addressing a personal dispute, but safeguarding the very foundation of our society. A wife bound in sacred matrimony has defiled her vows by consorting with a common laborer. This is not love, it is betrayal, betrayal of her husband, her family, and her community." Murmurs spread across the gallery. The lawyer continued, his fingers stabbing the air. "If such rebellion is allowed, what becomes of honor? What becomes of families when women discard duty for fleeting passion?" When he sat down, satisfied with his performance, the judge turned to Komal's lawyer. Rising calmly, the man adjusted his glasses before speaking. "My lord, honor is not a mask to be worn at banquets, nor a chain to imprison women. My client has lived in silence for years, unseen and unloved in a marriage built only for appearances. She chose honesty over hypocrisy. Is it a crime for a woman to seek dignity, affection, and truth? A hush fell. Then Komal herself was called to testify. Standing in the witness box, she met the judge's gaze without flinching. For years, I lived as a stranger in my own home. I was a wife only in name, paraded for my husband's reputation. I did not choose wealth or status. I chose Faraz because he saw me as a person, not as a possession. If that is rebellion, then I accept it. Her words drew gasps, even quiet applause from a corner of women activists. Kaiser's jaw tightened, his fists clenching against the wooden table. Finally, Faraz was summoned. He walked slowly to the stand, his steps heavy yet resolute. Facing the judge, he spoke in a voice rough from years of labor, yet steady with conviction. "My lord, I am no equal to Sardar Kaiser. I own nothing. I am nothing, except honest. I did not lure her. I did not dream of riches. I only know that when she speaks to me, I feel alive. If that truth is a crime, I am ready for any punishment." His words echoed in the silent courtroom. Even the judge leaned back, visibly struck. As the gavel struck to adjourn for the day, the air outside erupted again. Some cried out that Komal had disgraced her family. Others shouted that she had given courage to women everywhere. But inside her heart, Komal felt a calm she had never known. For the first time, her story was not whispered in corners or twisted in gossip. It had been spoken aloud in her own voice. And nothing, no scandal, no power, could take that away now. The courtroom hearings dragged on for weeks, each day pulling Komal Begum and Faraz deeper into the eye of the storm. Karachi was divided like never before. Newspapers printed her face on the front page daily. Talk shows invited fiery debates, and social media overflowed with hashtags, some damning her, others praising her bravery. Whenever she stepped outside, she felt eyes burning holes into her. At times, women hissed insults under their breath. "Sharam nahin aayi." At other times, younger girls whispered with awe, "If she can speak, maybe one day we can too." The duality of love and hatred followed her everywhere. Inside court, the battle only sharpened. Kaiser's lawyers harped on honor, insisting she had humiliated a respected statesman. They painted Faraz as a manipulator, a man using pity to steal a wealthy woman's heart. The gallery often gasped at their venom. But Komal's lawyer stood firm, turning their arguments on their head. "What is honor?" he demanded, "if it comes at the cost of truth? Is honor only a man's right to control while a woman's right to choose is dishonor?" Still, the tension was crushing. Faraz felt the weight most heavily. Contractors had blacklisted him. Old friends avoided him, afraid of association. Yet he endured, clinging to Komal's courage. At night, in the silence of her modest new home, he would whisper, "Komal, tell me again that we'll survive this." She would take his hands and reply, "We already have." Surviving is not in winning society's approval. It's in not losing ourselves. One evening, after an especially heated hearing, the media swarmed her outside the courthouse, microphones pushed close, cameras flashing. Questions overlapped. "Are you ashamed? Will you leave Faraz to restore your honor? Do you regret defying your husband?" Komal paused, her face calm though her heart raced. Then raising her voice so all could hear, she said, "I refuse to live against my heart. I have lived years in silence, imprisoned by appearances, no more. If society calls this rebellion, so be it. I choose truth. I choose freedom." For a moment, the crowd fell silent. Then chaos erupted. Some cheered wildly, chanting her name, while others jeered, calling her cursed. Her declaration spread like wildfire across every news channel that night. Komal Begum, "I refuse to live against my heart." At home, Faraz watched the clip replay over and over. His eyes glistened as he whispered to himself, "She is braver than I ever imagined." Kaiser, however, boiled with rage. Sitting in his office, surrounded by loyalists, he slammed his fist against the desk. "She dares humiliate me publicly? Fine, if she wants war, she shall have a war." His allies nodded, already plotting to exploit his influence to turn the case further against her. Yet, despite the growing pressure, Komal felt lighter than she had in years. Speaking her truth aloud had stripped fear from her. For the first time, she felt not like a prisoner of whispers, but like a woman who owned her choices. Still, the battle was far from over. The final judgment loomed closer, and with it, the possibility of either freedom or complete ruin. The day of judgment arrived with a heaviness that seemed to hang over Karachi itself. The courthouse was surrounded by throngs of people, protesters, supporters, media vans with satellite dishes, and onlookers who had made this trial into a spectacle. Banners waved in the humid air. Some read, "Protect family honor," while others boldly declared, "A woman has the right to choose." Inside, the courtroom was packed to suffocation. The judge entered, his face stern, carrying the weight of weeks of testimony, evidence, and public uproar. Komal Begum sat upright in her chair, dressed simply, yet radiating calm defiance. Faraz sat beside her, his hands clasped tightly together, his brow damp with nervous sweat. Across the aisle, Sardar Kaiser Hayat seethed, his jaw clenched, his pride wounded but his arrogance still intact. The judge's voice broke the silence. This case has become more than a dispute between husband and wife. It has become a question of choice, of dignity, of whether law exists to protect appearances or to serve truth. Kaiser's lawyer leapt to his feet. "Milord, this woman has humiliated her husband, her family, her community. If you grant her freedom, you set a precedent for chaos. No man's home will be safe." The judge raised a hand to silence him. Then Komal's lawyer rose calmly. "Milord, if a woman's happiness is considered chaos, then perhaps it is our definitions that need correction. My client does not seek chaos. She seeks honesty. She seeks the simple right to live without lies." Finally, Komal herself was invited to speak one last time. Rising slowly, she faced the court. Her voice, steady but filled with emotion, carried across the chamber. "I was a wife in name only, trapped in a house of silence. I was paraded as an ornament, not treated as a partner. With Faraz, I found something I had lost: respect, sincerity, love. If this is rebellion, then I accept it, but I will not live in chains." The gallery erupted, some gasping, some clapping. The judge struck his gavel for silence. Then his verdict rang out. After due consideration, the court grants divorce to Komal Begum from Sardar Kaiser Hayat. Furthermore, she retains her legal rights over her property and assets. The court finds no crime in her relationship with Faraz. The dignity of a woman lies not in silence, but in her freedom to choose. Gasps filled the air. Some women in the gallery wept openly, clapping with relief. Activists embraced one another. Reporters rushed out to flash the news. Kaiser's face turned crimson. He rose abruptly, his voice hoarse with fury. "You think you've won, Komal? You've only disgraced yourself. Without me, you are nothing." Komal turned to him, her eyes unwavering. "Without you, Kaiser, I am finally myself." Faraz's heart thundered as he took Komal's hand right there in court. He whispered, his voice breaking, "You did it. You're free." Outside, cameras flashed as Komal and Faraz stepped into the sunlight together. Reporters shouted questions, but Komal only said one line. "Today, I did not win against a man. I won back my life." The city roared with debate, but in that moment, Komal Begum's courage had already written history. After the judgment, life for Komal Begum and Faraz entered a new chapter, one no less challenging, but infinitely freer. The cameras eventually drifted away. The news cycle found new scandals, yet whispers continued to float across Karachi's drawing rooms. Some still called her reckless, others hailed her as a pioneer. But for Komal, the noise of the world no longer held the power it once did. She had stood in the center of the storm and walked out standing tall. Their first decision was to leave behind the mansion that had once been her gilded cage. Komal sold it without hesitation, despite Kaiser's threats of humiliation. In its place, she purchased a modest yet warm house in a quieter neighborhood. Faraz helped repaint the walls, fix the garden fence, and build shelves with his own hands. For the first time in years, she felt at home. Not because of marble floors or chandeliers, but because the house carried laughter, effort, and love. Days were simple yet fulfilling. In the mornings, Komal brewed tea while Faraz cooked parathas, a far cry from the formal breakfast once laid out by servants. They would sit together, sharing plans, teasing each other, or simply enjoying the silence. To her, this simplicity was more luxurious than any banquet she had ever attended. But they were not content to just live quietly. Komal's years of managing business projects, paired with Faraz's practical knowledge of construction, gave birth to an idea. They would build a boarding house. But unlike the sterile apartments she once oversaw, this would be different. A place where residents felt community, not just walls. The project began small, with just a few rooms renovated from an old structure. Faraz worked tirelessly, hammering, painting, fixing plumbing, often with other laborers who respected his humility. Komal handled the planning, finances, and community outreach. Together, they created a space with a shared lounge, a small garden, and even a reading corner stocked with donated books. When the first tenants arrived, students, young professionals, even a widowed woman searching for safe shelter, they were welcomed not as customers but as family. Komal often organized tea evenings. Faraz grilled corn in the courtyard. The tenants laughed, studied together, and helped one another, slowly weaving the kind of family that neither Komal nor Faraz had ever truly known. One night, after a community movie screening in the garden, Komal and Faraz sat under the stars. The sound of tenants chatting and laughing still echoed around them. Komal leaned against him, her eyes misty. "Do you see, Faraz? We didn't just build a house, we built a world. One where people can breathe without fear of judgment." Faraz squeezed her hand, his voice thick with emotion. "And we did it together. You gave me dignity, Komal, and I will spend my life making sure you never regret choosing me." She smiled, whispering, "I don't regret a single moment. Not one." As the night deepened, the two of them sat quietly, watching their little community sparkle with life. For all the battles they had faced, whispers, trials, and storms, this was their victory, a love that had not only survived but blossomed into something greater than themselves. And in that moment, both knew the world could say what it wished, but happiness was finally, irrevocably theirs.